Hi, my name's Ivy. Many of you have probably seen me from TikTok, Life After Baby Loss, and you've probably seen my son's face flying around on social media. So, I became a mum to Milo at 16 years old. Just after I turned 16, I found out I was pregnant. And I had to have a medical termination, and I also had to give birth to him stillborn. So, I'm going to take you through the start of finding out I was pregnant to scans and stuff, and my medical termination and me giving birth, which will probably be a whole different video. So I turned 16 in July 8th, and I think I found out I was pregnant in August. I had a missed period. I didn't really have any other symptoms apart from when I was further along in. So I went to my town centre and I got a bunch of cheap pregnancy tests from Wilco, and I took them in the public toilets with a friend, my ex-partner who was Milo's dad, and his friend. The first test I took didn't look positive, but there was definitely a shadowed line. So I kind of just left it a few days and I took another one a few days later. I took the second one by myself and it was a really dark line. A girl in the toilets also spoke to me and she said everything was going to be okay and, I'd get it sorted and I'd be great. Obviously, my partner at the time had asked me to get an abortion, which I didn't want to do because I was pretty firm on keeping my baby. Me and Milo's father kept a relationship for 2 years and split up end of last year, 2021. So I'd kept me being pregnant a secret for like maybe a week or so before I told my mum. I told my best friend to come with me and tell my ex-partner, like, because he wasn't completely sure yet. So I wanted to tell him in person. So we went to his workplace and we just told him. And then he kept, saying that he wanted an abortion, which I totally got because, we were teenagers. But of course, that upset me when I got home. So I told my mum about it and I kind of just cried into her arms and I told her, I said, I'm pregnant, and she hugged me and told me everything was going to be okay, and she asked me what I wanted to do. After that, we phoned my doctors up and we told them I was pregnant, and I hadn't really told my mum I was keeping the baby at this point because I was scared. Um, but my doctor just told me to think about it for about a week or so. And then we called back a week later and I told him I was keeping it. So he booked me in for an appointment with my midwife at around probably 9 weeks just to get all my family history information and just everything that was needed. So contact information, how far along I was. Yeah, and then after that they booked me for my 12-week scan, which I had two of because the dating wasn't exactly right. Because I have a family condition called brachiotorenal syndrome, which affects our hearing and our kidneys, I have to get my kidneys scanned regularly to check up on them, make sure they're both still working. So I went to that. I had my ultrasound on my kidneys, and the the lady that did it, she asked me if I wanted to see the baby, and I did. And he looked like a little jelly bean with arms, and he did a little stretch with his arms and legs, and it was the cutest thing ever. I wish I could have kept that picture, but they didn't have a printer, so I have to keep that in memory. The next few weeks went by, not much changed. I don't even think I was really sick, but we had our 12-week scan. It dated to 11 weeks. So we were rebooked in for the next week, which we went to, and then I was still 11 weeks, so I was measuring a little bit behind, but everything was normal as far as I could tell. And I had the next appointment with a midwife in another town, and they were just there to check the heartbeat and my kidneys again. That appointment went horribly because my doctor didn't even see me, so a nurse just came in and let me listen to his heartbeat, and she played it aloud and I got to record it, so I got to keep it for memory purposes, which I'm so glad I did because I never had another chance to do that. And then from there, I kind of just had to wait for my 20-week anatomy scan, which I went to, but it was meant to be Obviously, me as a teenager, I didn't know what that was, so I just went in hoping to find out if I was having a boy or a girl. So we had kind of a mini get together planned for afterwards. I had dyed blue hair, my partner at the time had dyed pink hair, and I gotten ready, I did my makeup and everything, and we went to the scan ready to do a balloon popping afterwards, just to find out that I had no water, amniotic fluid. So the day was ruined, and I was referred to fetal medicine in another town, and I just had to wait for that appointment. And they just told me to drink more water, which I did. I laid in bed constantly and I just drank loads of water and I was torturing myself with it. Then I went to the detailed scan and they confirmed that Milo had no kidneys, which was most likely from the result of inheriting my condition, brachiotorenal syndrome. I kind of expected bad news because from the first 20-week scan, I just cried the whole time because I knew something was wrong and I just kind of had that feeling. And then the doctor and the nurse there told me that my baby would not live and he was not compatible with life because no kidneys. He needs amniotic fluid to develop his lungs, which didn't happen. So he had very hypoplastic lungs and he had clubbed feet as well from being so restricted and not having enough room. So they suggested a termination, which I declined, and I was pretty set on going full term. So from there on, I had a scan like every few days, like every week, and I was constantly looking up online, researching how I could somehow get a treatment. We found one, but it just didn't exist in the UK. So I spent those few weeks in a lot of denial. But even though I was kind of like, I was pretty set on going full term, my partner at the time was set on having a termination, obviously, because he didn't really want to be a dad in the first place. So I spent 5 weeks looking for that treatment. So I made it to 25 weeks. And that was when pregnancy got really painful because Milo's body was just in my pelvis all of the time. So it hurt to walk, it hurt when he moved, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't feeling too good in there either. At every appointment I went to in the fetal medicine clinic, they suggested termination every single time I went. And then when I got to 25 weeks, which was my last chance to have the termination, I took it because I'd realised, like, I'd become sane at this point, and I'd realised that if I went full term, Milo was going to suffer, and there was not really a point to it. Obviously, a lot of people see it as a way, oh, he can be born and he would have felt loved, but I don't think he would have felt loved if he was fighting to breathe. So I took the termination, which made me feel really guilty for a lot of time after that. I felt like a murderer. And I'm not a murderer. I did it to be selfless, not selfish. But I didn't want my baby to be in pain. Of course, I support and respect anyone's decision to go full term. Like, I wish I had the strength to do that, but I feel like my decision was what was best for me and Milo. So the medical termination, it wasn't quite what I expected. So we had a needle which was like the size of my elbow to my wrist. It was really long, it was quite thick as well. The nurse and bereavement midwife that was there to support me, she kind of told me not to look at the needle, but I did. They did a scan when I was laying on the table and they checked his heartbeat, and the doctor said, do you want to hear it one last time? And of course I did. It broke my heart. I just cried the whole time. And they kept monitoring his heartbeat, and they numbed me. Didn't work, but they numbed me, and then they put the needle in through my womb and into his heart. I watched the ultrasound the whole time and I watched his heart stop. And my mum was with me the whole time. She was behind me. So while I was laying on the table, I kind of just had my arms behind me and she held my hands and just cried with me. After the injection I had into his heart to stop it, I had to wait half an hour so they could check again and make sure it worked. And through then, I kind of just had a drink, I had a snack, and I talked to the nurse and just cried into my mum's arms. I'm not sure what else happened. Oh, the bereavement midwife, she came in and she spoke to us about like what would happen. She asked me if I wanted to see the baby, and of course I did. My partner at the time didn't, so I didn't allow him at the birth because he wasn't going to let me hold my baby. He also wasn't sure on naming him, but I definitely wanted to do that. I was pretty set on the name Phoenix Ray until I saw his face, and I was just like, no, you're definitely Milo. I do remember the night before my termination, I sat up all night on my phone trying to record his last movements. Because I had no fluid, his movements were very like obvious, like you could see his whole body outline in my pelvis. It was quite scary. It was painful every time he rolled over. He only rolled over once, and I think he attempted to another time, but it didn't work. But he was head down, so I guess that's all that really mattered. So after that, I spent 2, almost 3 days with his dead body inside of me, waiting to go and give birth at the labour and delivery ward. Through that time, I had gotten a bunny rabbit to help me cope, and I just needed a baby to look after. It wasn't well, it kind of was, but I have owned other rabbits before, and I have lots of other pets that are regularly looked after. So we knew the cares and stuff. But I wanted a baby to come home to because I wasn't going to be able to bring Milo home with me. So after the 3 days, 2 to 3 days went by, I took a bump picture and my bump had kind of risen. I'm guessing that's because of the bloat that happens in decomp. But my bereavement midwife, she told me to call the labour and delivery ward and ask when a bed would be free so I could be induced to give birth. They induced me with these pessaries, which they had to push right next to my cervix to dilate and everything. I won't go into detail about my birth because I can make that into a whole other video, and it would make this one too long. But in the short story of it, I just had a bath. I was very sick and shaky throughout my whole labour. I was very cold, but my mum was there the whole time, and when I was in, I don't know, I kind of just felt dead for about half an hour. I don't know how long it was, but I was just lying there and I don't know if I felt anything, but my back was just really hurting. So I had my mum rub my back. And then I got up and felt like I needed to go to the toilet. And I didn't need the toilet, it was Milo's head. So I sat on the toilet and his head kind of just fell out. And then the midwife came in. She was like, "Do you want to try and get yourself to the bed, darling?" And I kind of just had to waddle whilst holding his head so he wouldn't fall out of me. And then it was just one push and he kind of just slipped out. The first sight I remember is just like a big blob that just came out of me. And then the midwife, she put Milo in a towel and put him on me and she cut his cord, which I was disappointed at because I would have liked my mum to cut the cord. I think the first thing I said was, well, my mum first said it was a boy, and she said what time he was born because my midwife wasn't keeping track of that. I think she was just a little bit overwhelmed, and it was probably her first stillbirth. But the first thing I did and said was, "What do I name him?" And I just looked on my phone whilst he was in my arms, and I took a selfie with him. My mum also took pictures of me with him, and Milo Paul just fit the name. Well, it didn't fit his name, it fit his face. But other than that, he just really suits his name. Plus, it means little soldier, which perfectly suited him too. I spent 3 days with him in hospital. I had a phone call to my therapist, I think on the second day when I went into the postnatal ward. Milo's father stayed with us the first night and he met Milo, cuddled him and stuff. He came in like a few minutes after I gave birth. Not much really happened from that. We went to, after I left on the third day, I cried, but the midwife said she'd look after him for me. And then we came back a week later before he had to go for his post-mortem, his autopsy. We called him and said goodbye, and then 3 months later after that we had his funeral. Anyway, I think that's the story done, so thank you for watching.